Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to another installment of the Relationships series. Thank you guys so much for joining us for lunch today. And today is going to be a fun one. We'll be talking about privacy versus secrecy. And we'll get a chance to sort of delve into some examples, some practical examples, as well as maybe sort of differentiating between the two and when they show up in our relationships. I know this is a big deal, especially in our digital age. Where everything seems to be on display and everything is up for posting on social media and so on. Everything is very transparent. We're very much willing and ready to reveal things about our lives. So, for those of you who do not know me, wait, I'm gonna put you guys on mute if you don't mind, uh, just so that I don't get feedback in the mic. Um, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Genevieve. I am a registered psychotherapist in Canada. I'm in private practice providing therapy for individuals, couples, and families. I also train interns and I consult with other therapists to launch their own private practices. I love growing. I love travel. I love teaching. I love reading. But by far, my most favorite thing is relationships and talking about all things that have to do with relationships. So I love relationships of all kinds, romantic, platonic, parental, spiritual, sibling, even relationships with things like money, relationships with our thoughts, relationships with ourselves, relationship with God, all the things. So I believe we were created for relationships. And that means for me, it's important for us to spend time delving into how we can make relationships better because that's essentially what we were created to do. So that's our design, that's our makeup. We're hardwired for connection and attachment. And so why not spend time figuring out how to do this thing that we were purposed and born to do even better? And so that's why I'm here and that's what I love to do. And I'm so glad you guys are here with me. So we'll jump in today. So our topic, we know what it is. We will go through some definitions. We'll talk about the role of trust in privacy and secrecy. We'll talk about boundaries because I think it's a significant buzzword within our culture today. And so we'll talk about what it looks like, what it means, what it can be, what it might not be. We'll also look at the impact of both privacy as well as secrecy on our relationships, so how we interact and engage with other people. We'll look at a personal challenge, which I always have for us. Sorry, just to ground us in what we are looking at, what we're talking about, what we're having conversations on, and then how we kind of draw that into our everyday lives. So I'll have a personal challenge for you, and then we'll look at next week and we'll answer any questions that we might have. And of course, as per usual, I am not an expert, and I invite us to have an open dialogue, an open conversation, because obviously there's not two of us, but I have a passion for conversation. So I want to hear your input. I want to hear your ideas, even if you differ, even if you have different, thoughts about what I might be presenting. You're welcome and invited to throw your hand up, or perhaps just turn on your mic, or throw it in the chat. Some of the thoughts that you're having about what you're seeing and what we're engaging with, and even if someone else says something that you might want to jump in on or you want to comment on, I would suggest to ask them first if it's okay to do that, because we don't, we want to make sure we keep everything mindful as well as respectful as we have these conversations, because everybody's input is welcome and important. So I encourage, again, open sharing, and then of course to take a mindful stance. Just maybe pause and think before you share, thinking about what it might have as an impact and so on. So first, as usual, let's look at these definitions. Very simple definitions to ground us. I like broad definitions rather than specific ones or narrow ones. So privacy, very broadly, is the state or condition of being free from being observed or disturbed by other people. So privacy could look like getting dressed in in a bathroom stall versus getting dressed in the open area of a change room while you're going swimming, or so that would be like uh, privacy. You want sort of just, you don't want to be observed or disturbed by other people in that context, so you go into the bathroom stall and change. Secrecy is the action of keeping something concealed or the state of being kept hidden. So secrecy is quite different than privacy. It's sort of what would it? I don't even know what it would be like in that example that I gave. It might be like, uh, hmm, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it would be like not even going into the change room at all, if I want to use the same example, because you might have had a sex change or something. So you're like, okay, no, I can't even get changed in there. I was born a man and now I'm a woman. I can't even. It might be something like that. So just sort of the concealing part, or the concealing aspect would be the attached to
Oh,
secrecy.
Jen,
Yes,
Jen, I have one for you.
go for it.
If you want, secrecy in terms of the changing, secrecy would be like not change, like when people get tattoos but they still live in their parents' house and they always change in secret, or you're hiding. Then you're hiding something.
Ooh, yeah, I love that one. That's true, right? So you're concealing it. I love it. Thank you for that. Um, so yeah, that would be, and we get the sense, we get the sort of internal sense of what the difference is. I put a test here, just a test, like if you don't automatically know how to distinguish between the two, you can sort of think of it like this. If you're found out, how would you feel? Or if another person found out about what you were keeping private or secret, how would they feel? So that's sort of a gauge for us to, I guess, determine what might be under the secrecy category and what might be under the privacy category. There's a psychologist in, I think she's out of Texas or something. But anyway, I wrote down her quote. She says, if you aren't revealing something because you don't want to, it's likely an example of maintaining privacy, versus if you're not revealing something because you are afraid of the consequences, then it's likely secrecy. So it's if you don't want to versus if you're afraid of the consequences. So if you don't want to reveal it, that's just your choice. And that might be privacy, right? Hey, I'm in the change room, so on. I don't want everybody to see my goods. Versus I'm afraid of consequences. My parents might give me some licks if they see that I have the tattoo on if I change, in front of my brother or my sister or what have you, right? So that's sort of a gauge for us to determine what might be considered privacy, which is versus what might be considered secrecy. So I want to ground us again in sort of the trust aspect of things, because that's really what we're talking about when we think about privacy and secrecy. We're looking at the trust factor, the level of trust in the context of our relationships with other people. Do we trust ourselves? Do we trust others? Can we create those connections in a safe and healthy way that we can commit to, that we can depend on, that we can be reliant on, that we feel secure in? That's the essence of our relationships, right? We want to be accepted. We want to accept others. We want to be approved of. We want to approve of others, and all of that rises and falls on trust. And this is for individual relationships, like romantic relationships, our relationships with our kids, our parents, our friends, our colleagues at work, and even institutional or organizations. That kind of managerial leadership. All of that stuff. It all rises and falls on trust. And so I have here Erickson's psychological developmental stages. And we're not going to go through all of it today, but I want us to notice what's at stage one. And oh, sorry, Deborah, I'm going to mute you. I want us to notice what's at stage one here. Okay, so stage one of our development as human beings is trust versus mistrust. And it begins in infancy, so when we're born, and it's developed over the first 18 months or so of our lives. So the foundation of all the things that we build as it pertains to relationship and development is our ability to discern or determine between trust and mistrust. So what we develop, what we decide that we, or how we decide to interpret the behavior or the treatment that we're getting. So if our parents are, they're there for us and they attend to us, and they every time we cry, they're like, "What's wrong? What's going on? Let me get you some food. Let me rock you to sleep," or so on. All of those things. It's like, okay, well, I feel like at the end of the day, I can trust that my needs will be met. And this is all visceral. So let me maybe clarify. This is all pre-verbal. This is before we can talk, we can think. We've come up with cognitive ideas. We've come up with the ability to reason and to think critically and all that stuff. This is visceral. This is like feelings brain. This is like instincts. This is reflex. This is all the stuff that we don't always understand when we react to certain things. We're like, oh, why did I feel like that? And it's just like this overwhelming feeling. And we're like, whoa, that doesn't even make sense to us, but it's like ingrained in us somewhere. So this is the area or the time or the period that we are developing this ability to trust others, to take care of our needs or to meet our needs. And in the attachment language, it would be something like creating a secure bond or a secure base. And that means basically that we are able to trust that others are going to meet our needs. We are able to trust that when we ask for help, we're going to get it. We are able to trust that other people are essentially good, and that we can fit in with them. We can attach to them. We can connect to them, and there will be safety there. The mistrust aspect usually shows up when we don't get the kinds of responses during that stage that we can interpret as meeting our needs. And so if we have to cry ourselves to sleep every night, we don't get the soothing or the comforting or the, ooh, you're okay, and let me see what's going on with you, or we're crying because we're hungry for hours. Children that are neglected, they develop a sense of mistrust for other people. Other people aren't going to meet my needs. I can't ask for help. I can't trust that they're going to show up for me. I can't rely on them for anything. These are the people. And I was like, I'm a recovering avoidant and insecure attachment person. So I can say this. These are the kinds of people, and I was like this, who do all the work in a group project because they don't trust that anybody else is going to do the work or can do the work like them. These are the kinds of people that are super independent, don't rely on other people. They're just like, if I can't do it, I'm not going to ask for help. I'm just going to keep trying and struggling. These are the kind of people that are usually quite distant in terms of their capacity and ability and willingness to connect closely with other people. And I'm a recovering this person. So I'm saying that not to judge or anything like that, but just to identify some ways in which we exhibit trust versus mistrust in our relationship context. So like most things in life, we see that there's a foundation and then we build upon that. Okay. So trust is a really significant one. And I want us to ground ourselves in that when we think about these two concepts, privacy and secrecy, because one builds trust and the other one doesn't. So let me throw this out there. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts or comments about that, but you guys are free and welcome to and invited to shout me out. I don't know why this is not switching. Okay, there we go. Yeah, okay. So boundaries, about buzzword. This is another thing that it's really hard to do. It's very easy to talk about, but it's very hard to do. So even though it is a buzzword, I'm not sure if we're super clear on what it means. And I mean, leave it to our generation to like take things to the absolute extreme. Like on one end, generation now can be like, I don't know, an entire reality series on like when boundaries go wrong. On one end, we have like cancel culture, which is like boundaries on crack, like like don't let anybody in, nobody's allowed to talk to me, nothing, it's just like guard, wall, no, nothing. And then on the other end, we have like hookup culture, which is like the boundaries rebellion, like no boundaries, let everything and everybody in. Like it's like two extremes. And of course, extremes can be damaging and unsafe. But I think when we look at healthy boundaries, especially in the context of like privacy and secrecy, and of course, in light of our conversation, we have to look at it in terms of limits that keep you safe, but does not turn into isolation. It doesn't isolate, they don't isolate you, but they keep you safe so that you don't lose yourself in a relationship. You can maintain your autonomy, you can maintain your individuality, you can maintain, sort of your sense of, what might I call that? Yeah, sort of your sense of self. Like, you're a whole person, you're a human being. You have your own thoughts, opinions, and feelings, and you want to be able to express those without feeling like you need to like contort yourself. You need to compromise all the time. You won't be accepted. There's no place for you if you don't agree, or whatever have you. So it's important to ask ourselves, especially when it comes to boundaries, like what we feel when we're making certain decisions. Someone says, hey, can you come by tomorrow morning and help me with such and such, but you had planned to, I don't know, do your morning routine, go to the gym, be in prayer, I don't know, do your yoga or whatever. Or you had planned, to get to work early and catch up. And you're like, oh man, like, oh, this person's asking me this, and I just don't feel like I can say no to this person because they're going to get upset, or they might distance themselves from me, or there might be consequences or punishment, or whatever have you. It's like, what do you feel about that? And does there need to be a boundary that's put in place at that moment? Like, hey, I can't come tomorrow morning because I'm you don't even have to say because. There doesn't even need to be a because, to be very honest. But I can't come tomorrow morning. I can come, on Friday, or I can come another day, or I can come at another time during the day if you still want to do the thing for the person. But boundaries are like saying no. They're like limits. They're guarding your time. They're protective. They put safeties in place for you, so that what you're doing to serve others is not to your detriment. But there's a healthy balance. And sometimes boundaries don't make us feel good because a lot of us are in the people pleasing category. And it's difficult for us to say no. And I've come across this many times. I mean,
I was in that category for many years.
There we go. Yeah. Tell us about that.
The people pleasing category, and I didn't know how to say no, even to my kids, and it like I created more anxiety for myself because of that, right?
Yeah, kids.
Yeah.
Kids will make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that because, when it comes to adults, sometimes it's easier, but I know I've heard parents say that, when it comes to their kids, it's almost like there's a shame involved. Like, I don't want them to be like, I hate you, mom. I hate you. I hate you, dad. So there's like an inclination to, especially, I mean, they're obviously in our care and our responsibility. So there's, more of an inclination to be loose on some of those boundaries. But then we have to think about what that's modeling for the children, right? It's like, hey, because the behavior that we model and that we exemplify are usually the behaviors and habits that they then go on to perpetuate. And so thinking about what that actually does for you, what it did for you on the inside. You were like, oh, I'm saying yes, but now I don't feel good about that. And then reining that in. Sorry about that. So yeah, thank you for that. So we're looking at, okay, so we've got trust as a sort of a grounding point for us, a foundational point. We have boundaries as a necessary implementation and a requirement to sort of talk or sort of think about that. And then we have the impact. So I want us to be very, very clear on some of the impacts, and we'll go through some stats in a second, because I think stats really help us to move away from what we think and feel on the inside to what is actually happening on the ground amongst people, and just really looking at the numbers. So the impact of secrecy on our relationships: broken trust, and I put broken and fractured trust. Broken trust happens on the inside of ourselves. So when we keep secrets, we break our own trust. We internally know that we cannot be trusted. And so on the inside, it feels really terrible because we're like, oh man, like, I'm keeping the secret. Like, how, if I can't even trust myself, how are other people going to trust me? And then how am I going to find myself in the context of other relationships where I'm inviting people to trust me, or I want people to trust me, but I can't even do that for myself? And so we then become the baseline, and it's broken because we know we're holding on to the secret. Fractured trust has to do with others, because when we're holding on to secrets, we automatically will begin to think that we're other people can see, like other people will notice, like we're always in this like high vigilant concealing mode. Like, oh my gosh, are they going to find out? Oh my goodness, I have to make sure I don't say that. Oh my gosh, and make sure I don't look over there. Make sure I don't, right? So that so that we're not revealing anything, or we're not suspicious in any way. And then it's hilarious because then we end up being suspicious and other people kind of looking at us like, what's going on with you? Because it does come out, unfortunately, or fortunately. So lack of trust for others, lack of trust for ourselves. And this could be like when, I don't know, a company is, they might be going through some financial difficulties and layoffs are coming up. But of course, they don't tell anybody. It's like everybody in management and leadership positions, they're all running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And everybody in entry level is like, what's happening? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, everybody's laid off, right? So that, of course, that can help, or that can have the effect of broken trust and fractured trust. And that also depicts communication breakdown as well. And we have to understand, like, trust is the vital ingredient here. And so all of these things, secrecy erodes trust, period. And so all of these things that take place as a result of secrecy are essentially as a result of broken trust, lack of trust. Communication breakdown happens when there is lack of trust. People don't talk to one another, or people talk to one another on the surface. People don't answer questions. People are evasive, right? It's like, oh, why are you asking me that? Very defensive. Oh, what makes you think that? What makes you think that? Right? Very suspicious. Very suspicious. And so we have to really look at that, as a point when we're looking at the difference between secrecy and privacy, and the effect that it has on our relationships. How are we going to connect to people deeply and be open and honest and transparent and authentic if we're forever suspicious? Like, we're always like, everybody's always looking sideways. Everybody's always wondering, like, what's going on, so we have to really be mindful of the impact, for sure. So communication breakdown is one. Isolation and loneliness, those are definitely impacts of secrecy on relationships. We do feel isolated because we aren't able to be transparent. We can't be upfront. We can't be open. We can't show other people what we're really thinking and feeling. We can't express our idea. We can't do that when we are holding on to secrets. I want to make sure that I'm clear, because secrets are like on every level, on any level, right? So this is all kinds of secrets. This is not just like, oh, I'm cheating on my partner, right? I'm talking about secrets, things that we've held on to, even about ourselves and our experiences in life, that we are afraid or shameful of sharing with other people. Those are secrets, right? And so keeping that from other people, it puts us in a position of isolation or loneliness. Shame and damaged self-esteem are also effects or impacts of secrecy on our relationship. If one person, sort of discovers that another, and this is in the context of romantic relationships, like if you find out your spouse is cheating on you, there's a sense of like shame and damaged self-esteem. Like, what is wrong with me? I've heard that a ton of times in dealing with divorcing and separating couples, right? What is wrong with me? Like, why did she do this to me? Why did he do this to me? And that erodes our self-esteem, right? This secret that came out has that impact and effect on us. And of course, it can lead to those feelings of like, betrayal and feelings of inadequacy and so on. Hurt and exhaustion are also impacts on our relationship. Concealing is hard work. That's the reality of the matter. Keeping things a secret, it's hard work. And so at some point, we are going to become exhausted. We are going to become tired. It's draining to do this work, right? To keep ourselves, and even in the context of not feeling free to be ourselves in relationships. Like, if I show up and I'm a talkative person, or I'm a quiet person, and I feel like I can't be myself in that relationship and be accepted, like, even that, pretending to be something that I'm not, because I want to be accepted, even that is hard work. Like, it's just hard. It's like, man, I'm exhausted. I have to show up every day and pretend I'm something and somebody that I'm not, or that I don't feel comfortable being. And there's no room, because I either haven't taken the room or other people haven't afforded me the opportunity to be authentic and just, just to be. So that's hard work. And so we have to look at, and that erodes our own trust for ourselves, right? When we can't trust ourselves to show up in the context of relationship because we don't trust others to accept us as we are, right? So it all goes back to trust, and important to note that as we look at the impact. So the impact of privacy on relationships is quite different. And I find that even when you look on the inside of yourselves and you feel you feel the things, like you sort of like, okay, how does that sit in my stomach? When it's secret stuff, you get like nervous. It's like the butterflies in the stomach and you're like, oh my goodness, oh my god. The only secret that I would probably think of that might not necessarily bring up that sort of shameful feeling would be like if you have like a surprise for your loved one. Like say you have a 16-year-old and you're like, oh, I'm gonna plan a sweet 16 birthday party for them. It's like, oh yeah, I can keep that secret and it doesn't feel heavy and like weighty and sort of connected back to like shame, distrust, and so on. And then so the impact of privacy on our relationships looks like autonomy and individuality. So privacy allows for us to sort of maintain a sense of self, sort of a sense of our own personal interests, independent decision making. And I think it comes with a level of respect for another person and for ourselves as well, right? We are different people. We are individuals, and so we are afforded the privilege of having our own thoughts and ideas about our lives and about things. And yeah, I think there's something to be said, especially when it comes to the relationship aspect of things, because we don't want to be like controlling other people. Like I think that you should act like me. I think that you should be like me. I think that you should do what I do. I think that like that kind of stuff gets into, sort of that weird space of like control and abuse that we talked about a couple weeks ago, or was it last week? A couple weeks ago. That space where we're trying to overtake or superimpose our own selves onto other people. It's very like judgy and very like icky. So there's a difference between that and then having just autonomy. Here I am, here you are, I respect me, I respect you, and there are going to be some areas that I don't know about you or that you prefer to keep to yourself. And then some areas that you will share with me, and we can build on that as we build relationship. Mutual trust and respect, of course, is an impact of privacy, and that's just allowing yourselves to have conversations about what you feel comfortable sharing or not feel comfortable sharing. When you begin to sort of trample on other people's rights or preferences or levels of comfort, that's when you need to start putting up like more significant boundaries. And if you notice yourself doing this, you need to pull back. Like if you're like, oh, and this happens like I've heard more young couples, they're like, oh, he wants me to have sex with him, and she doesn't want to, or he wants it, that kind of stuff. And then he's like, oh, well, you need to do this, or he's like pressuring, and she's like, no, and that's like the weird space that you get into. And it's important to notice when the boundaries need to be put in place, right? So like here you are saying, I don't want this, or I want this, and another person saying you shouldn't want this, or you should want this. Like that's very, very sticky ground right there. So make sure you guys are just noticing that within your. Ooh. Where am I getting feedback? Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Healthy boundaries, like we talked about, of course, is an impact of privacy in our relationships. And then intimacy is like intimacy and connection. So our capacity to connect deeply, and to really begin to respect another person for all of their good, bad, and ugly. And then also to do that for ourselves. It's a compassionate position as well. I want to be mindful of the time so that we have a chance to chat. Okay, so the difference, this is just a, what do you call it, like a meme, or I don't know, a quote that I saw online. The difference between privacy and secrecy is this: one is used to protect, the other is used to hide. And I think we've talked about that. And it's important to note that privacy shouldn't be used as like a pretext for secrecy. as a means to avoid open communication and accountability within a relationship. Open, honest communication, along with, of course, mutual respect for the boundaries and so on, is really important for maintaining that healthy balance between like privacy and transparency and then secrecy, right? And so I think in this quote, we notice that there's like an inherent deception in secrecy, right? It's an active like hiding, it's an active holding back, it's an active, concealing of something that if the other person found out, it would hurt them in some way, right? It's important for them to know that, and you're holding it back. It's like if you get into a relationship with someone, or you meet someone, and you say to them, oh yeah, I like you, let's continue to know each other, but you're still sleeping with somebody else. Like, it's important for them to know that information. You're keeping it a secret or hiding it, either because you think they're going to walk away because you reveal it to them, or because you don't respect yourself or them. And I don't know, whatever the case might be. But the point is, they need to have that information to make an informed decision about what they're going to do with you. And so it's important for us to recognize when and how we're implementing or applying secrecy and calling it privacy, right? And so, yeah, we have to do our sort of own due diligence in that area. Okay, 97%, these are secret stats. 97% of people have at least one secret, and on average, people have 13 secrets. So that's sort of an interesting, this was a survey done more than 5,000 people, and they've done many surveys over the years, many research studies on secrecy, because it's a very popular topic, especially in the context of relationship. And most people do, keep secrets, especially when it comes to relationship connection points. So like infidelity, sex, cheating, that kind of stuff, like sexual desires, like those are the areas that most people keep secrets in, because they elicit a lot of shame. Like shame is such a like, it's a horrible thing that motivates a lot of secrecy, right? Keeping a lot of things inside because we think other people are going to judge us or look down on us for the thoughts and feelings that we have, or for the experiences that we've had in our lives, or for the choices that we've made in our lives. So 97% have one. On average, people have 13. And maybe just think about yourself. Like, what are your secrets? What secrets do you have in your life that you're holding on to? And how many are there? Common secrets include issues surrounding relationships, sex, infidelity, violations of others' trust. And secrecy is linked to increased anxiety, depression, symptoms of poor health, and more rapid progression of disease. So keeping secrets actually has no positive effect or impacts, unless you're planning a surprise party for your spouse, your parent, your coworker, or your child. I don't really see any positive outcomes there to secrecy. I don't know. You guys might tell me otherwise. I'd love to hear some. But as per the research, I haven't seen any as yet. So courageous conversations is sort of the antidote. So what can we do? What can we do when we're considering our behavior, we're considering information, we're considering our attitude, we're considering how we show up in relationships? I think it's really easy. I think getting rid of secrets is just sort of the I don't know. I think that's just the antidote. I mean, I have zero secrets in my life. There is not a single thing that has happened to me, that I've been through, that at least one other human being on this planet doesn't know. And that might not be realistic at this point for some of us, because of course it took me some time to get there. But I think part of what I noticed in getting there was how hold on, let me go back. How important courageous conversations were in that process. So the strategies for me for healthy balance, and for getting rid of shame, and for getting rid of secrets, and for opening myself up to connecting deeply with other people, and for doing this thing well that I was born, designed, created, and wired to do, called relationship. The impetus was for me to start speaking, start saying, start opening up my mouth, start revealing, start sharing, start being vulnerable, start being transparent, start being authentic, start, expressing truly what I thought and felt, and to doing so, and doing so courageously. Like, it's hard to say something like, oh, when you said such and such or did such and such, I felt rejected. Because then people start doing stuff like, oh, you're so sensitive, and oh, you're so emotional, and oh, and at first I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I just feel like I'm being human. I feel like most people, would feel that way. Like, if you did that, if I did that to somebody else, I feel like they would feel that way. And so what I started noticing was that most people are just not, they're not at that place. And I wasn't there. I wasn't there for a long time. And I used to say things like this. So this is me being reformed and growing in some maturity. And I used to say that because I just didn't have the capacity to understand. My emotional intelligence was like way, way low. So I'd say stuff like, oh, you're too emotional, or you're too sensitive, or don't let your feelings govern your actions, which they shouldn't. They should always be in connection with your cognition. But it wasn't for lack of, sorry, I should say it was for lack of maturity and understanding when it came to feelings, emotions, and just the depth of how we are as people. And so I want us to really start thinking about what courageous conversations would look like for us to actually say things that we feel and think, and allow for others to do the same. Like, if someone tells you, hey, you did something to me and I didn't like it, or you said something to me and it bothered me, for you to be able to say, oh man, shucks, my bad. Like, I'm sorry about that. What can I do to, rectify the situation or make things right? And so that being an opportunity rather than a shameful experience where we need to defend and deflect and say, oh, but you did this, and oh, but that, and that kind of thing. So courageous conversations can really help us move from secrecy to closer to sort of the privacy aspect on the spectrum, and make decisions about what we're going to hide versus what we're going to protect ourselves with. Okay, this is my personal challenge to you. So I've been doing counseling and therapy for a number of years now, and I've worked in the addictions arena, so with people struggling or wrestling with addiction. And what I found to be one of the most helpful and powerful models has been the sponsorship. So in AA or NA or GA, if you go to Alcoholics Anonymous or Gamblers Anonymous or Sexaholics Anonymous, or whatever the addiction is, the addiction support group is, they have a 12-step program that helps for you to walk out of addiction and begin building new habits for authentic and healthy living with other people and with self. And so the steps include, finding something else outside of the self that's bigger than the self or more powerful than the self, which would be like God, right? So they talk about the God hunger or the God void. And then what they also have is sponsors. So you have to connect with a sponsor, someone who's further along in the recovery game than you are. And you need, and you have to sort of, like, hear them or share with them, allow them to mentor you, help them, not help them, but hear their stories about how they walked out of addiction. And that model to me is just so profound and so biblical, right? Like, again, we are created for this relationship thing. And even as a therapist, I recognize how powerful it is for people to just come and sit and talk, and for us to go through their growth process together, and for us to have breakthroughs that they wouldn't otherwise have on their own. Why? Because we're created for this. This is like, this is the most effective and impactful way for us to achieve growth, for us to achieve healing, for us to achieve purpose, for us to achieve fulfillment, for us to achieve meaning. Like, this relationship thing, everything is born out of relationship, connection with other people, and community. And so my personal, hey, hold on, let me backtrack. And so the tendency for us to keep secrets, to isolate, to move away or withdraw from other people, to be by ourselves, to embrace independence because we are afraid of being hurt, or we do not want to risk being hurt in relationship, is actually what goes against our humanity. It is working against us. It is working against our healing. It is working against our growth. It is working against our ability and capacity to achieve our dreams. It is working against everything. Okay. And so my personal challenge to you is to find someone you can grow with. Find a sponsor, so to speak, or find a 2x2. In the Bible, the disciples went 2x2. They never went alone. And so it's important to find a friend, find a therapist, find a mentor, find a coach, find someone that you can grow with, and that you can sort of, it's the scripture. There's a scripture that says iron sharpens iron, right? Someone that you can do this thing with, this vulnerability, openness, that kind of thing with, because freedom from secrecy, freedom from secrets, gives you a certain level of what's the word? It is freedom. Freedom is the word. If we don't have secrets, then we have freedom, is really what I want to say, because there's nothing for anybody to find out. We're just here. We're here doing our thing. We're taking up our space in the world. We can be whoever we want, however we want. We're here. And so it's important for us to recognize that. And I'm going to close out here in a couple seconds and give us a few minutes to chat. But yeah, my personal challenge is find someone that you can grow with, find someone that you can tell your secrets to, that's not going to judge you, that's not going to make you feel shame for making that decision back in the day. Oh goodness, I had an abortion when I was 14. And they say, oh my God, like what? No, choose somebody who's mature, choose somebody who can stand with you and walk with you, not judge you or criticize you for the decisions you've made or for the things that you're keeping a secret. No, someone that you can say this thing to, and they can recognize that, hey, you're human. They can feed it back to you. They can reflect it to you, so that you can leave released, right? Free. Like, I don't have to hold this anymore. My goodness. Oh, I did this thing, or I went here, I made this decision, and all the things that make you such a bad person, and all this. Like, listen, I think at the end of the day, there has to be someone there, someone in your scope of influence, someone in your scope of community, that can stand with you, that can walk with you, and that can help you grow. And so you just need to discover that person, find that person, search for that person, look for that person, and then connect with that person. Because this is the season for like healing and growth. Like, why do we want to stay the same? There's no point. There's no reason. And there, we can just do so much better. So I encourage you. That's my personal challenge to you. Find someone you can heal, you can grow with, that you can reveal your secrets to, and eliminate secrecy from relationships, and just be free to be yourself, and free to connect deeply with others. All right. So we'll close out on that note. And of course, oh boy, yeah, if you have a fear of intimacy, or you've got secrets and so on, then and you might find emotional connection difficult, then yeah, next week is definitely for you. So we'll be talking about affection and emotional connection. And I know a lot of us have difficulty in these areas, both with ourselves, so giving ourselves affection, emotionally connecting with ourselves, and then of course with others. So we'll talk a little bit about what that can look like, how we can grow, and of course how it can impact our relationships. So join us next week for Affection and Emotional Connection on the relationship series. And if you missed a show, or if you missed one of our lunch and learns or lunchtime meetings, you can get it on the Mentiverse in about a week. We'll upload all of all of them except last week is there. We'll upload all of our conversations and so on. Just throw your email in the chat. I'm only sending it to those who send me their email, but you can download the Mentiverse app on Google Play, or in the Apple Store, and then you can capture and catch all the replays from the relationship series. And there are other things on there as well that you may want to take advantage of, that will help your relationships and help your life. So do that. It'll be fun, guarantee you. and then of course come out next week. And then yes, sorry, lastly but not leastly, fill out the survey for a chance to win. I always love to hear your feedback. Thank you guys so much for giving me your feedback thus far. And we'll be thinking about inviting other people on and sort of doing some tweaky things. We'll see. So thank you for your feedback and your ideas already, and we'll see what happens as we continue. So yeah, I don't know, you guys, I'd love to hear your input about your own experiences with privacy versus secrecy, if you've changed, or or if you're thinking differently or considering something different right now, and or if you're not, or if you feel comfortable keeping secrets, that's cool too. So yeah, I'd love to hear your input. What have been your experiences with this topic?
So, Genevieve, going through this lesson here, it actually opened my eyes to something that I realized that I was keeping a secret. You were talking about surprise birthday parties and things like that, right? And how that generally doesn't hold weight, like, it doesn't hold weight on your chest or whatever. But I was just realizing something in my marriage where I would plan dates for my wife and like do certain things for like a party, or like we're going on a romantic date or whatever, but I wouldn't really tell her until like maybe a week or two before, because we didn't have a lot of money. So I will always, try to squirrel away money or try to spend credit or do something, because I wanted to spend time with her. It was a genuine thing, but I wouldn't tell her because I was afraid that she would say, well, why are we spending money on this right now? Or, we should be doing this some other way. And I was always nervous getting to the date day. Unless it went well, I would be super nervous. And it was so I'm kind of realizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that makes sense, because there's a surprise aspect to it, but there's like a fear aspect to it, because it's almost like you thought she would disapprove, like you're doing something for her enjoyment, but you felt like you would be disapproved of for making the decision that you're making to spend time. So your value for spending time, for quality time, is really high. And then for the finances part, she might have had more of a value for that, and there would be security attached to that as well. So yeah, that's a really cool juxtaposition, just sort of contrasting the two. They're keeping secrets and all about good things, but also managing fear that might also be attached in terms of the response or the reaction. Yeah, that's a big one. And oh my goodness.
Another thing that I also realized too is like a little while ago, I asked somebody out on a date. The person asked if I had told anybody else. And I was so nervous about it. I said no. And meanwhile, I had told other people about it. And it was kind of a check for me to say, oh, I haven't dealt with that yet. I got to fix that, And it was just something like, it was an eye opener. Like, I've worked on some other things, but it was an eye opener to me that I hadn't worked on this specific thing.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to ask you a question, if you don't mind answering. What made you keep the secret that you had told other people?
No, I'm aware that this person doesn't like her business talked about all over the place and stuff like that. So I was aware of that. So I didn't want to make her see me in a bad light or whatever.
Yeah.
Because, and even though I was kind of doing my due diligence and saying, hey, talking to mentors of people that I trust to say, hey, do you think this is a good idea or whatever? But at the same time, I was afraid of how she would look at me or how she would judge me, because I know how she likes to be a private person.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's the gauge, right? The gauge between privacy and secrecy. It's you are fearing the consequences from the other person. So you're afraid of the consequences, which would be she might see you in a different light, or whatever the case might be. And here's another thing that I didn't actually talk about. So I'm talking about keeping secrets or concealing things, and sometimes it is by omission, so not saying anything at all, But at times, and thank you for pointing this out, and this is not a slight or a judgment, but just a realization. Secrets, keeping secrets, turn into saying things that aren't true. Like if you want to keep that secret, it can turn into you lying, like explicitly outright lying, like not just hiding in the corner, not saying anything, trying to keep things under wraps or what have you, but literally when people ask you, you will lie to keep that secret. And so things that you're holding in your life are causing you to lie, hello, red flag alarms going off. Because lies have just no place in our relationships, right? We want to be able to have relationships that don't have lies, because lies open up the doors to so many things that are super unhelpful and super unhealthy, and they just, well, they turn into this crazy things. So Deborah has a hand up. Talk to us.
Hi, Jen. This session
Hey.
was so useful. I am learning so much every day, and like I mentioned, like this definitely applies to me. I think one thing that I'm learning about the difference between secrecy and privacy is it's important to understand when and I wrote it down, the people that we're in relationships with need certain information to make informed decisions about what they're going to do with us.
Yeah.
And so I found, like, for me, one of the ways that I was kind of struggling with secrecy versus privacy is, I guess, as a believer, when you talk about your faith and you talk about Jesus, right? People want to see, okay, like, what's the evidence of that, like in the workplace or in academia or whatever your, life aspirations are. They want to see, like, certain manifestations of like your faith. And I realized that I'm the type of person, like, when I'm working on something, I don't want to say anything about it. So whether it's like me wanting to further my education and go to the next level, or interviewing for a different job position, like I just won't say anything at all. And I'll kind of just try to not lie, but I'll just like avoid the conversation, be very conclusive. And it really does look like secrecy. And sometimes people might get a little frustrated because they want to know, like, are you one of those Christians that you're just up in the air, like you don't think there's anything important about like being on the earth and serving people? But it's just because I know when I'm working on something, I should just be quiet until everything's set in stone and all my I's are dotted and all my T's are crossed. But what this is teaching me is, like, as much as people might be a little bit frustrated about not knowing like what I'm up to, or having those concrete realizations of what they think my faith should result in, like, if it's something they really need to know, then God will reveal it to them. Like, I shouldn't be guilt tripped, or I shouldn't be pressured into sharing any information because it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't reflect my faith well. But yeah, thank you for this, because it's definitely very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you touched on there, Deborah, was maybe the invitation in that space to put a boundary in place. And so, the asking of the questions can be met with, or perhaps responded to, by being really honest. Hey, I actually don't want to tell you. You don't need to justify whether or not they are okay with that. This is you. I actually don't feel comfortable sharing that information, and that's okay. You can say that. And so that's actually a way to enforce a boundary, or put a boundary in place that keeps you safe and that makes you feel good, right? And then if they keep asking or keep badgering or keep pressuring, then you need to put up even a stronger boundary, and you need to let them know, hey, I put this boundary in place. I don't want to do this. I'm going to need for you to not have this conversation with me again, or request this from me again. And so it can be assertive. When we talk about assertiveness, we can implement the broken record approach, right? And so that's just saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over in the same way, to let people know that you are serious, you are consistent, and you are committed to your boundary, and you're requesting that they continue to respect that boundary. And so, hey, I'm not ready to talk about that. That's just it. And if they say, well, I think that, I'm not ready to talk about that. Well, I don't think that's fair. I think that you should probably, I'm not ready to talk about that. You get what I'm saying? You get my drift? So you can let them know with that broken up red, I'm not ready to, the answer is not going to change. The response is not going to change here. So yeah, that might be helpful just to consider your boundaries in that area as well, when, especially if there's discomfort surrounding those conversations and sharing.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
How long can you continue to use that? I mean, like if it's, because people could use that in many ways, right? That I'm not comfortable talking about that. Like, is there a limit to how long you could carry, like, I mean, like without judgment, carry that kind of a response on? Because again, some people use it as a wall and you never ever get to the nucleus of things. My concern is it could be used in so many different ways. The way you're saying, great, right? But I've seen it used in other ways just to never get to the point. And that's my concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's fair. That's fair to say. The question then would be, what is the context of the relationship and the context of the assertive response? And so if it's, if you're in a marriage, if it's with your husband or with your wife, then you guys have to have a plan for when you're going to get, it's not just, at work, a work context, it's different, but I'm not ready to talk about that. And this plan should already be put in place when it comes to boundaries. But on Saturday during our family meeting, I'm going to bring it up. That's going to be point number 3, right? And so there has to be a succession plan, so to speak, if you're in the context of close relationship. But when it comes to things like what you're doing, what you're dreaming, what you're planning, and there's people that are in your life that are not invested in any way, then you're not obligated to share that information at any point, much less, I'm not ready to share that yet. It's I'm not going to share that with you. And that's okay too.
That makes sense. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a hand up, JC.
Hey, Jen. I think, well, before I get to my point on that last point, I agree. I was having this conversation with a couple guys last night, and I'm often talking about this because I have a lot of friends that, getting into new relationships, and I think it depends on the nature of the situation. And when you're trying to decide, hey, how long do I wait before, they're dealing with something personal and they're trying to heal through something, or trying to decide if Christianity is the faith for them, or if they're willing to move to this city or that city. I think sometimes you can put a healthy time limit on it. I found that is helpful to say, you know what, we don't have to talk about this now, or if something that you're figuring out on your own, and you're not comfortable talking about it, okay, let's give it some time. But then also vocalizing why it's important that we reach a conclusion or talk about it at some point, because I understand you're dealing with this, but then from my perspective, like, it doesn't make sense to invest 6 months into something that you could have found out within a month that, hey, you know what, I'm only going to church for you, or I'm actually not willing, I've never been willing to have kids, and I've never been willing to move to this city or what have you. I have some close friends that, like, one of my really close friends dated this guy for a year, and it took him a year and her asking and actually pushing for him to finally reveal that, yes, indeed, he was lying in the beginning and had no intentions of like XYZ. You know what I mean? And it was 100% a deal breaker for the relationship. So I think putting the time frame on, but then explaining the reason why there should be a time frame.
Yeah.
For the check-in is, so that I know that I'm not going stir crazy. And I know that you're like, if we have open dialogue, then it's not you starting a journey, going into all these different avenues in your mind and working it out on your own with nobody to sort of challenge your thoughts and just to give you another perspective. So that was my thought on that.
Absolutely. That's big.
In terms of like privacy and secrecy, I'm someone who's actually I've been told many times by different people in my relationships to actually be a little bit more private about what I discuss, about what I say with my partner, because sometimes I'm someone who's always ready to talk about everything in the moment and work out feelings and not be concluded in what I feel and what I'm thinking, but not everybody can necessarily handle that or is ready to deal with that. So if I give an unfinished thought, it now causes more harm than good. And So it's almost, sometimes it feels like, oh, maybe I'm keeping a secret, but if somebody can be offended or upset by something, but actually not be, how do I say this? You can be offended by something. This is happening a lot in our society now. You can be offended by something that you really don't have any reason to be offended by. You know what I mean? It makes you uncomfortable, and so you choose, I'm upset because I'm not happy about the way this makes me feel. So yeah. I've had to learn to, with some things, be private for a time being, and then reveal information. Or even some things in the past is like, if it's not relevant to our current situation, if it's not going to affect our finances, our faith, things of that nature, then there's no need to give information about something that happened 10 years ago, was dealt with 10 years ago, has no chance, this is the important thing, has no bearing on the present and no chance of affecting the present or the future. Sometimes knowing things just to know things is not the best. And you have to really gauge, what those things are for people,
Yeah. And I think that's part of this conversation, gauging what those categories, where those things fit in terms of categories. And thank you for the reminder. Yes, thank you. Throw your emails in the chat, guys. We're going to wrap up here in about 30 seconds. But yeah, I think it's important when we're having these conversations to also recognize that this is stuff that's it's sort of like in a bubble. And the expectation is that everybody has this understanding. That's not the truth. The expectation is for us to be able to know these things, but also share these things within the context of our relationships and call others to the place of maturity and knowing and acting, in line with some of these principles. And so if somebody's lying because they're keeping the secret because they don't want to lose the relationship, well, there's no way to control that. But there is a way to teach and to model the importance of transparency, openness, lack of secrecy in the context of relationship, and invite the other person, whoever you're in a relationship with, to also adhere to that same value and that same standard of connection in relationship. And that takes some nuancing, it takes some, of course, forgiveness, and takes some time, but it's always possible. And so we just have to make sure it's always possible if the other person is willing. And we just have to make sure to sort of ask some of those salient questions as well. All right, we're closing. Thank you guys again. See you guys next week for, what did I say? Affection and emotional connection. Have a good one, guys. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks for lunch.